I want to start tonight by letting you in on a little secret, if you don't already know it. We're so often told that Yom Kippur is about who you were this past year. But tonight, I want to tell you the truth. It's not so much about the past as it is about the future. Because even though teshuvah is about repenting for our past deeds, the essence of today's question is not who was I yesterday, but who do I want to be tomorrow? Who will I be when Yom Kippur comes around again next year? Will I be different? Or will I be repeating the same mistakes? Will I be committing the same offenses, beating my chest for the same deeds? These are questions not just for us as individuals, but they're questions for us to ask as a community and as a people. Who do we want to be on next Yom Kippur? Who do we want to be on Yom Kippur in 10, 25, or 50 years? And if we want as a people to be a strong, vibrant community, there's teshuvah to be done. Today we need to start asking these questions. Who do we want to be? We as a people and as a community have made fellow Jews invisible. We've ignored the stories and experiences, and more, we've pushed them away. I won't speak for anyone individually, but I can say that I personally know there have been times I've been guilty of this, and I know that collectively as a people and a community we have been. We just said in the Amidah, the Vidui, and we strike ourselves not because we've done each of these things, but because they exist in the world. And we, in part, are responsible. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel would say, some are guilty, but all are responsible. And we all are guilty. We all are responsible for those who have been pushed away. There's a midrashic teaching that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. And it comes from a play on the letters in the word Yisrael. Yeshishim ribo otiot LaTorah. And it refers back to the 600,000 Israelites who left Egypt and stood at Mount Sinai. But interestingly, if you've ever tried to count all of the letters in a Torah, you would find that there's not that many. There's only roughly half. Nachmanides, or the Ramban, he explained it, that the letters we see on our Torah are actually only half the Torah. That in the actual Torah, the heavenly Torah, it's made of black fire and white fire. The spaces between the letters aren't empty, but there's something of their very own, something just as important. And a Torah we know is not kosher. It's unfit if it misses a single letter, but it's just as unfit if it's missing a single space. The Jewish people are the same. We are incomplete when we are missing a single person. When we've excluded a single voice, seen them as empty space rather than a substance. In our community, not Beth Tikva, but the whole community, the Jewish world, treats large segments of our people as if they are invisible, as if they are just the spaces between the letters that matter. But tonight, we're going to talk about teshuvah. The Rambam teaches that every character trait sits on a spectrum between two extremes. And in general, he says we should find ourselves somewhere in the middle along that spectrum. But when you're trying to fix a negative trait in yourself, he tells us to lean to the other extreme. So for example, if you're exceedingly prideful, you should seek to be excessively humble. If you're too quick to anger, you should practice extraordinary kindness. And in this case, to correct ignoring members of our people, making them feel othered, treating their experiences as if they did not exist, we begin teshuvah with abundant visibility. It's the first step to radical inclusion, toward making sure that our Torah, that our people are complete. I want to share with you a few stories. I want you tonight to put yourselves in somebody else's shoes and imagine what it would be like to be them. Last year, Mara Gad, a biracial Jewish woman, was invited to speak at the major conference for Reform rabbis and congregations. But the moment she arrived, she was made to feel unwelcomed, different than her Jewish peers. And this endured the entire conference. She began, when she arrived, being questioned if she was really who she said she was. Later, despite wearing a bright orange name tag with the word presenter clearly printed, she was repeatedly offered complaints about the room service, mistaken to be a member of the hotel staff rather than a participant at the conference. When she told others that she was a speaker for the convention, she faced confusion and surprise. What would a black woman have to address this Jewish crowd about? She writes that while others were at Shabbat services, dinner, and song session, I was alone in my hotel room, crying, because I did not feel comfortable and safe being out with my own people. What should have been a wonderful experience for her ended up being a painful one. The weekend was a reminder to her that even among her own people, she's an outsider. And I wish this was a unique event, but it's not just Mara that this happens to. This happens to other black Jews, and this happens to others who don't fit our typical imagination of what a Jew looks like. I know Jews by choice, converts, even Jews from birth who don't look Jewish. They're of Hispanic or Asian descent, and they're often greeted with surprise when they tell others that they are Jewish. The response is almost always a question. Did you convert? Their children are asked the same questions by peers and other adults. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to have your earliest memories of synagogue life be people questioning if you belong in a Jewish space. These are Jews who are treated as the other, set apart as outsiders, because they don't look like characters from a Seinfeld episode. Their stories and their experiences have been invisible to the community at large. LGBT Jews, for too long, were taught that their love was a sin. They were told that their families were unfit to be sanctified by our traditions. And while I'm incredibly proud of the work our community has done this past year, the decision to permit same-sex wedding ceremonies, there is more work to be done, both at our shul and in the larger Jewish community. Imagine what it would feel like to be a same-sex couple, to be looking to join a synagogue. And when you ask for a membership form, what's the first thing you're going to notice? A spot to list the name of the husband and wife. The very first message is that when we imagine what our community looks like, when we imagine who our community looks like, we didn't imagine you. A young Torontonian woman writes about her own experience going to synagogue as a queer Jew. She says, I've always had to leave my queerness at the door when I went to shul as a teenager. It eventually meant I stopped going. I never stopped, though, wanting that connection, that community. I was honored this year when I officiated the first same-sex marriage as a member of our clergy. But inclusion is so much more than permitting a marriage ceremony. We need to ask ourselves, what would it feel like to be an LGBT Jew? What would it take to make them feel fully a part of our community? How would you feel if committees had to sit and debate whether or not your marriage, your family, was condoned by God? Or if your rabbi had to teach classes explaining that who you are as a person, your identity, isn't sinful? That your desire to create a family is a blessing and not a curse? Is a policy change enough for you to feel welcomed and wanted? Another group that historically has been made invisible are women. For too long, women have been excluded from ritual life. And a policy change isn't enough to undo that. It takes action. It's more than saying, now you are permitted. Jewish ritual is a heritage that for so long was denied to so many. And I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done as a people and as a community. But it's more than words to undo generations of religiously enforced inequality. I know women who wrap tefillin, and when they do so publicly, they go to a minyan. They get questioned about their observance. Do you pray daily, 3 times a day? Why do you choose to do this? Is this a feminist thing, putting on tefillin? What happens when a man joins a minyan? Everyone's happy, excited to have a new member. If he takes out his tefillin and he puts them on knowing what to do, nobody asks questions about what other mitzvot he observes. If he doesn't know how to put them on, or doesn't even have his own pair, somebody will help him put them on. And what happens? Nobody questions what other mitzvot he observes. Nobody asks why he chose to observe the ritual of tefillin instead of a less public act. Nobody asks as if a statement by wearing them. So many of the young women, the bat mitzvah students I meet with, they tell me that they don't want to wear talit or tefillin. They tell me that's what men do. Their mothers don't wear them, their grandmothers don't either. And these young women come to shul, and they see a few women in talitot, and they see even fewer with tefillin, and they tell me they don't want to stand out. Think about what it would be to be a young teenage woman. Standing out is the greatest fear you could possibly imagine. Should the pressure be on them to make the change? Is it their responsibility to change our culture? If we truly believe that women are equal to men in their right to practice Jewish ritual, then we, as a community, are obligated to start changing the culture, to make all women feel comfortable participating in what is no more or less than their birthright. Teshuvah is about repairing something that was broken, and it takes more than words. The Rambam writes, Averot shebein adam lechavaro, eino nimcha lo leolam ad sheyitain lechavaro ma shehu chayav lo. Sins committed against another person will never be forgiven until they are given what they are owed. Simply put, words are not enough. It takes actions to fix what has been fractured. So how do we repair making someone invisible? By shining a light on their experience. Tonight I shared a few of those experiences, some perspectives. But these aren't my experiences. They're not my perspectives. What we need to do is bring people to share their stories in speakers, in classes, in sermons, in programming, for people to share their stories, people whose stories for too long have been denied and ignored. And those who are cynical might think of this as tokenism, as a symbolic gesture without real content. But it's the first step to change. Radical visibility. We need to start somewhere. So this year, I'm excited for a wide range of initiatives to bring visibility to those who have been invisible, to include those who have been left out. Actions. We are hitting the ground running. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., I'll be having a discussion with Anna Paul, a Jewish woman of color, about her experiences balancing these identities. And this is not a one-off program, but part of a larger conversation as a community about how we can make all Jews, regardless of race and ethnicity, feel comfortable, feel that Beth Tikva is a home for them. We're going to have speakers who can share their experiences, balancing their Jewish and LGBT identities. We are working to put together an adult education class focused on synagogue and ritual skills. So anybody who wants to can strengthen their knowledge and ability to participate in Jewish practice. All will have an opportunity, if they want, for an adult b'nai mitzvah. This class will be open to anybody. I am so proud to be a rabbi in this incredible community. A community that really is at the head, leading change for inclusion and diversity in our Jewish landscape here in Toronto. In just the last few years, Beth Tikva has become egalitarian. We've become the first conservative synagogue in Toronto to have a policy permitting clergy to officiate same-sex marriage. We've done outreach to interfaith families, but there is more to be done. As I mentioned at the beginning, teshuvah is not about the past. It's about the future. Our work is incomplete because our community is incomplete. There are those who are still invisible. I can't speak with certainty about how many Jews of color there are in Canada, because every recent study I can find on Canadian Jewry doesn't ask the question. I suspect the numbers are similar to those in the United States, about 12 to 15%. But even if we assume that it's less, we round down to 10%. In the next generation, 10% of Canadian Jews will be Jews of color. That means 1 out of every 10 people who could make a minyan will be a Jew of color. The question is, will they be sitting in our minyan? Will they be in our sanctuary? Or will there be seats left empty? Approximately 1 in 20 Jews identifies as LGBT. As we envision what our community will look like in a generation or two, will those seats be filled in our sanctuary? If we don't want them to be empty, it's not a question for tomorrow. It's a question for today. We have to include them as our vision of the future. Women make up half the Jewish population, but do they make up half the ritual participation? The duty isn't on those who've been excluded to change the culture. It's on the rest of us to invite them in. As a community, we have to ask ourselves, who do we want Beth Tikva to be in a generation, in 2 or 3 generations? Who will be sitting in our minyan? Who will be sitting in our sanctuary? Will our community, will our leadership reflect the demographics? Will our staff and our clergy? If we want to be a strong and vibrant center for Jewish life, we need to start working towards that goal today, not tomorrow. It starts with visibility and it ends in inclusion. It's as much for us on the inside as it is for those on the outside. There's a story in the Talmud. When Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah replaced Rabban Gamliel as head of the Jewish Academy, he removed the barriers to entry. He let all who wanted to come and learn in the Beit Midrash enter. The Talmud tells us that thousands of new students came to study that day. But it doesn't tell us specifically how many. What the Talmud says is that some say there were 400 new benches added, and others say 700 new benches added. The Ketav Sofer taught that it was actually only 400 new benches added to accommodate the new students, but that others account the 300 benches of the original students because the depth of learning increased so much due to the influx of new voices in their Beit Midrash, in their study hall, that they are included as if they were new students. Their community was not diminished by opening up and including new voices. It was diminished by leaving them out. It was incomplete, like a Torah that only counts the letters and not the spaces. It is not those outside our walls who suffer alone. It is us who suffer too. So what is the solution? It's in the story. Bring in more benches. Create a space for all Jews to participate in Jewish life and ritual. Create a space where all Jews feel welcome, where they feel able to be their full selves, where they are seen. This year, we're going to work hard to make sure that everyone who wants to be a part of our community has a bench, has a place among us. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. Jews. We use terms like Jews of color, Jews by choice, LGBT Jews, but at the end of the day, these are distinctions without a difference. They are necessary as the opposite extreme. After being ignored, it is needed to recognize them, to shine light on those who have been in the dark, But everybody I've spoken about tonight is simply a Jew. So tonight's the night to start the process. Yom Kippurim huzman teshuvah lechol yachid u'lerabim. Yom Kippur is a time of teshuvah for all, for individuals and the community. So tonight we need to look inward, as individuals, as a people, and as a community. We need to ask ourselves, what can we do? How do we atone not just for things we may have done, but for what others have done in the name of our tradition? How do we atone for generations of Jews who were ignored, who were pushed away by the community at large? Who will we be on Yom Kippur next year, in 10, 25, or 50 years? Will our seats be filled with all who want to be a part of Jewish life, or will we have empty spaces? Will tens of thousands of Jews simply be invisible to us? It is a difficult path of teshuvah. We will make mistakes along the way, but it's for our sake as much as it is for theirs. Tonight we ask that God guide us on the path. Help us to have the strength to listen, even when it is sometimes difficult to hear. The ability to see that strength comes from diversity. The awareness of what unites us rather than what divides us. And the courage to honestly examine our deeds with the ability to grow. Most of all, may God bless us that in the years to come we are a blessing to each other. Shana Tova.